Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for your attendance today. Can I begin with, first of all, any report for apologies for absence?
No, it's full attendance.
We're all here. Okay, thank you. Can I also take the opportunity to record or pass on our condolences to the family of Kenny Hay, a former councillor in Barrhead, who I understand sadly passed away just the other day. Item 2 on our agenda is declarations of interest. Can we know any declarations of interest for the meeting? No. And item 3, moving on, housing services and the annual assurance statement. I assume Phil.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Firstly, I wish to say this paper has come to Cabinet later than it would normally. It comes every year. Like all local authorities, it has been substantially delayed. As a result of COVID, local authorities didn't submit their returns to the Scottish Housing Regulator until July 2020, and in return we didn't receive the benchmarking data until October 2020, and we need to receive the benchmarking data before this paper can be submitted to Cabinet. It has 3 component parts. All are a requirement arising from the Scottish Housing Regulator. And the first component part is the annual return on the charter, which is contained at Appendix 1, which is commonly known as the landlord report. What this does, it details the performance of the service in a variety of fields, such as rent, repairs, gas safety, etc. The second element of the report is called the assurance statement. This is a self-assessment in which we look at the strengths or weaknesses of the service and identify areas for improvement. And the third of the component parts is detailing an impact of COVID on the service in the last 12 months. The COVID impact is dealt with at paragraphs 8 to 11. A number of these issues will have been presented to Cabinet previously, so I don't intend to go into that into detail. The landlord report element is dealt with at paragraphs 12 to 14. It details, for example, that our rent arrears are below the national average, and we perform well in relation to tenant satisfaction and in relation to repairs. The assurance element of the report, which is from paragraph 15 onwards, notes that in the previous year, weaknesses or areas for improvement that we had identified were in relation to voids and temporary accommodation. The issue in relation to voids is that we have a largely paper-based system because our current software system cannot effectively accommodate voids. However, we are replacing our own software system with a new MPS system. This is noted at paragraph 20, which will enable us to deliver the void service much more effectively. In relation to temporary accommodation, provision has been made in the capital programme to permit us to build more temporary accommodation, and a number of our pressures in relation to temporary accommodation are being alleviated. To conclude, I am happy to recommend this report to the Cabinet. In approximately 70% of the performance indicators that are measured by the Scottish Housing Charter, we perform above the Scottish Council average. And in that regard, I'm happy to recommend this report to Cabinet and also happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that report, Phil. I think, yeah, it is a good report. I'm happy to open it up for any comments. Councillor Bamforth.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Phil. And it is an excellent report. There's some really great stuff in terms of tenant satisfaction, compliance with housing quality standards. But the void thing still concerns me. I understand what you're saying about the paper-based system, and we're now moving to electronic, and that you have made improvements, or you've identified where the improvements in the management system. But this is something that we bring up every time one of these papers comes about voids, and I know that and it's not really in terms of the loss of rent we have, it's because of the amount of, I'm sure all councillors are the same, they get phone calls from residents frequently looking for one of our council houses, so it's the the effect on our tenants in these voids. And I understand that going forward, hopefully it will improve, but we've been aware of this for so long. It's gone up 35% in the past year, the number of voids we have. Is that due to the pandemic and not being able to go in and do work? I'm just wondering why, when we've identified it every time this paper comes up, we've discussed voids, and why we haven't managed to get any further forward prior to this new system when we've actually gone back the way. But as I say, the rest of the report, some of the stuff is excellent what we're doing. So I know particularly Suzanne and John Kelso and yourself are doing some great work in housing, but this seems to be the major sticking point that I certainly get a lot of residents come on to me about.
In relation to COVID has had, not just for ourselves, but for all social landlords, a significant impact on our repairs, in that we've had difficulty accessing properties that require for workmen, for their tradespeople to socially distance, access to suppliers, restricted number of staff in the office in terms of allocating houses. So that has had a substantial impact. One of the main obstacles we have identified was in relation to the software system. It is a very substantial and expensive software system. Consequently, we needed to undertake a tender exercise. We needed to speak to potential software providers. Once identified, we need to look at interfaces with existing systems. There was a large process of testing, etc. So there can be a time lag of 2 to 3 years between identifying the need for a new software system and its effective implementation.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Tony, just
Danny, yep.
Okay to come in, yeah?
Yes, on you go.
Just a point to Caroline's views there in regards to the voids. One of the biggest stumbling blocks we've got in voids is, the utility companies. Sometimes if we've got a house ready to let and, we need a new gas meter fitting, it can take up to 3 weeks for them to come out and actually fit it. Same with the gas or the electricity. Any utility company, we've a major problem trying to get these companies in to do work for us in voids. And it's something we need to look at very closely. I know through legislation we've got to get through them, but there must be some way around about them that we can get these companies out quicker to do the work more voids. That's one of the major problems we've got with voids.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Any further comments? No. Okay, I think in general, yeah, it is an excellent report. We know a lot of the improvements that we've had over the years, certainly in our housing services. And that's made a huge difference, obviously, for many of our residents. The number of voids does continue to be an issue, but hopefully work is now underway, as Mr. Dawes has explained, to try and alleviate that issue and bring much better control over the void issue and hopefully reduce the number significantly. Are we happy then, colleagues, to note the recommendations of the paper? Note housing services performance for 1920 as outlined in the annual return of the Charter, and approve the assurance statement for 2021 for submission to SHR, detailing the areas for improvement in their compliance with the SSHC standards and our statutory obligations. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 4 on our agenda and the Better Points initiative. And I assume either Mr. Cahill or Phil.
Gillian to present this one.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is first to inform members about this new Better Points initiative, and also to seek an exemption from tendering in accordance with Standing Order 15. We're looking at this on the back of our successful BEAT, the street projects which targeted school-age children. So this new incentivisation scheme is aimed at young people over 14 and adults within the area. Phase 1 of the project has been costed at £80,000, and there is a possible phase 2 project if the scheme is successful and achieves its goals. So we will obviously monitor that If it does achieve its goals, then we would be looking to introduce phase 2, which would increase the cost to £100,000, which is why we're seeking the exemption. So this is it's a mobile app that people would put on their phones, which would indicate when they were travelling a sustainable or active way. They would then essentially collect points. The idea is that we go into partnership with some of our town centre retailers so that they would offer benefits such as a free cup of coffee or a free newspaper, you know, whatever the kind of benefit is that's secured. And then the people who take part in the Better Points initiative, you know, are encouraged to go into the town centres. That increases footfall. You go into the shop. Hopefully, you'll buy more than your free cup of coffee, and it's seen as, you know, a very positive way of supporting active and sustainable travel, and at the same time support the town centres. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Gillian. Happy to open it up to colleagues for any questions. Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Gillian. And a couple of wee questions, and one was, who competes with Anson's anyway? I mean, I read their proposal and so on, and that looks fantastic, very comprehensive and all the rest of it, but do they have any competitors or not really?
I'm not aware they have any competitors. This is quite a bespoke scheme that they have run in other parts of the country, so I'm sure that they have secured that scheme from, you know, anybody copying it.
Okay, and the other wee question, Gillian, if I may, when, I mean, obviously during COVID, when the pandemic is still kind of raging a wee bit, we're not going to make much progress with active travel, I think, or any sort of travel. When will this all kick off and finish?
The first phase is due to start as soon as possible, if, you know, as soon as we can get it up and running, and should end by the end of March, the middle of April. So the idea is that we're moving into spring. We've got longer days, we've got longer evenings, and obviously better weather. So to encourage people to use active and sustainable transport, then, you know, should hopefully set people up for the rest of the summer and encourage continual use of both the app and sustainable travel and active travel.
And then we'll know how it all went, and hopefully well, and then we can expand it with the next phase.
Yes, absolutely. The key to the success of it is to engage with, you know, larger companies and obviously smaller companies as well, to get their staff incentivized to take part. So that's the general idea, and that's what Anson Consulting will do. If we go for a phase 2, if it proves to be successful, then that would basically go through the summer, and then hopefully make people use better choices and, you know, enjoy their active travel. So that's the idea. We'll see if it works.
We hope so, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bamford.
I think this is brilliant, and Beat the Streets, we know in my ward we did it, we got to participate twice, and it was so popular, and I just wondered, following on from Councillor Merrick's question, I think it was Intelligent Insight that did Beat the Streets, where I presume some of these ideas came from. Did we go back to them, knowing that they've successfully done Beat the Streets several times? And I know we can, you know, approach contractors, but I just wondered if given that they have a track record with us, if we had approached them and asked them if they do something similar. But I agree, it's a fantastic initiative. I still wonder how it will work in terms of how we know people have been travelling sustainably. Do we know if they're travelling walking? Does it get triggered by how many steps they do? Does it get triggered by them getting on a bus and travelling by bus? Because I'm assuming the app picks up, you know, First Bus or whoever. So that's my two questions. One, does Intelligent Insight do a similar kind of initiative, and how does it differentiate between what you're doing?
Thank you. Intelligence Health, it does beat the street. They target school-age children. So this particular organisation, it's young adults and over 14 children and adults. So it's a slightly different programme for different people. In terms of the recording, so I don't know. I use an app on my phone to record the amount of steps that I take on a daily basis. So that seems to be that's technology that exists just now. And I understand from reading their document that trains and buses can also be. It depends on the movement, so they know what the movement is. They build that into the app, and the app knows when they're on either walking, whether they're on a bus, or whether they are on a train. Don't ask me how it works, but apparently they can record that and they know when it is.
Okay, thanks, Gillian. Any further comments? No. Okay, thank you, Cos. Yeah, I think we all know that Beat the Street was extremely successful and encouraged a huge amount of participation across the authority. So yeah, happy to welcome this new initiative, which we hope will continue in the same vein. Sorry, Alison, or Leona, sorry, you want in? No, it's all right. Just seen a hand coming up there. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully this initiative will encourage the same in terms of active travel, but hopefully also be a bonus to our many businesses and shops in our towns and villages, because it is aimed at also encouraging a shop local initiative. So hopefully that factored in as well encourages people to utilise that. On that basis, colleagues, I'll be happy then to approve an exemption from contract standing orders to enable East Renfrewshire Council to appoint Anson's Consulting, and the delegates delegate this to the Head of Environment and the Chief Planning Officer to approve sign the service level agreement between East Renfrewshire Council and Anson's Consulting in line with Council policy. I'd be happy to approve, colleagues. Thank you. Okay, moving on then, the next item on the agenda, item 5, is the City Deal and Balgrayston Road project, and Mr. Cahill, I assume you deal with that.
Thanks, Leader. Okay, I've tried to capture this in the report. This has been a really challenging project, one of the most challenging ones we've faced actually, and it's quite complicated, but I'll try to explain the key points. So I've got Gillian here who can supplement those key points at a later point in the debate once I've finished kind of trying to summarise the position. So really this is just to try and update the Cabinet in the current position with regard to Balgrayston Road City Deal project and an associated increase in expenditure, but I can explain that and I'll do that in a few minutes. The road's now open. I don't know if anyone who's seen it yet, but it's absolutely fantastic. It's a great project, but it's not all about the road, and I'll explain that as we move on. It's what it actually opens up in terms of further infrastructure and benefits for the council and for residents. So by way of background, I won't go into any great detail. This is one element of our City Deal package of projects, which amount to almost 44 million, the majority of which, around £38 million, is actually funded by the Scottish and UK governments. So bear in mind that the proportion of the overall expenditure that forms part of the council's capital programme is only 6 million. I know I say only 6 million, but if you know what I mean. So what does the project actually do, apart from providing a cracking road? We've created new access road adjacent to St Luke's High School, 2 traffic light junctions, active travel link. But more importantly, maybe if I could just explain what the road does, it opens up the new residential development opportunities in the area, including access and utility for 200 homes to support the regeneration of Barrhead. As a complete aside, particularly Barrhead members will note the increased house building that's been going on over the last couple of years. It's absolutely transformed Barrhead, and it's having an impact on St Luke's School, etc. A positive impact, that is. This will also include opening up and allowing access to the first phase development of over 40 council houses that are proposed in that area. It will also improve the Dams to Darnley Country Park and it also benefits, this project also benefits from, in relation to the new rail station regarding the rail and bus interchange, but we can come on to that. And there's other planned improvements along the Ors Road, which are complementary to this, and will also help deliver Barrhead South up to 1,050 new homes within the next decade. In terms of the finances, this is where it gets a bit complicated. Way back in March 2018, the Council made a provision in its capital programme of £12.564 million in relation to the Barrhead Station project. Now, that Barrhead Station project actually comprised, as did other city deals, several projects, but they were kind of accumulated into one sum. So the station project actually included a proposal for a major upgrade of Balgrayston Road. And in February 2019 at the council meeting, that was broken down into a roughly estimated £2.21 million for Balgrayston Road and a remaining balance of 10.354 for the station. However, what was not clear at the time, and it's only much later that it was picked up, the estimated £2.21 million was only for the construction of the road. It didn't include, and if you look at a project of this size, you can imagine that they'd be quite substantial. All the design fees, the topographical surveys, and all this type of stuff that has to go on in the background. So the other fees, such as I said, like design fees, supervision fees, staff fees, consultancy fees, other pre-work reports, all that still lies or lay within the remaining budget line for the station. Then their contract was let for £1.769 million and work started in June 2019, and we thought it was going to be finished by December 2019. However, there were a whole range of challenges that subsequently delayed the opening until recently, October, November 2020. This is an NEC3 engineering contract, which includes a phrase called compensation events, which allows negotiation and discussion around changes to the contract that can either arise from us changing the scope of the contract or unexpected things, if I could just kind of summarise it at that. So those compensation events are a part of NEC3 contracts, and these are new to us. For a number of reasons that I'll come on to, the cost increased from £1.769 million to £3.242 million, so that's an increase of 1.473. However, I would add at this stage, that's not simply an overspend. That included betterment and added value, and also the application of compensation events. So that compares with the existing capital provision of about £2.21 million. So trying to move on, what we did is, you've got to remember, please, that when this scheme and contract was actually let, the design process starts maybe about a year and a half, possibly even 2 years before. And during that time scale, we've been developing our other proposals for City Deal, and we've also been developing other things such as the housing proposals and all that sort of stuff. So the world has, in that area, has massively changed over the period. So what we did was we took the opportunity to add betterment to the project, resolve some existing issues that had been affecting the area, and importantly, it was also to future-proof the site for further development and provide more benefits for residents and visitors, and that includes disabled parking and a whole load of things. So if you look at paragraph 16, these are just some examples. They're certainly not all, and if at a later point Gillian might want to come back in, we've updated and enhanced the Balgrayston Road with raised levels, pedestrian crossing facilities. We've put in a full 3.5 metre wide active travel link from Dams to Darnley Country Park to Springfield Road, including new traffic lights, helps cyclists, helps pedestrians. It's all to do with active travel and promoting that. We've put in a new bus interchange for the proposed railway station, so that'll increase accessibility for users of the country park and the rail station. We put in we relocated, a foul waste pumping station to help with the council's housing development proposals. So that's providing space now for an additional 9 council houses, which is absolutely great. There's always been an issue in the past about surface water and flooding at St Luke's. So once we were on and started to look at it, we thought, look, just sort this and sort it now. So that's been ongoing and that's been improved. That included quite an extensive stuff at St Luke's, included new road gullies, resurfacing, Gillian, you improved the layout and the traffic management, etc. And really importantly, a big element was we extended the water supply pipe south of the railway to future-proof the supply to the proposed dams to Darnley Country Park, because it's got no utilities, and that's a thing that will be explained further in a later report. So those are just some examples. So although those additional works have resulted in increased costs, like I mentioned before, the benefits have been massive in relation to the local area. And in my view, that project still demonstrates great value for money. Those works were not included in our original cost estimate that I mentioned to you that was provided in the capital programme of £2.21 million. They're additional and they've amounted to around £670,000. One point that I would add is that in terms of all these additions, these are all things at some point in time the council would have wanted to do, and I would have asked the cabinet for approval to do these schemes. So the fact that we took the opportunity while on site to do these things, if I'd left that and came back at a later date and asked for those works to be carried out, well, obviously the contractors left the site, you have to relet a new contract, etc., 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 which would have involved extra time and extra cost. So that's the reason why that was done. In terms of funding them, what I'm proposing for that £670,000 is that we'll take £200,000 approximately from existing roads and housing capital budgets, because that's where they would have come from in the first place, but also to supplement that by developer contributions of £470,000, which would total the £670,000. I can advise that's an appropriate use of developer contributions, and there's an existing Section 50 legal agreement that facilitates that. There was then a requirement for other further work, and that was only realised when we were on site, and that's not uncommon. It's common, particularly on large projects like this that involve infrastructure and going into land. It was only realised when as I said, when we were on site, and it couldn't have been foreseen by any party until that contract was on site. With some COVID delays, utility company delays, and discovery of unknown ground conditions, those works roughly amounted to about £414,000. Over and above that, elements of the scheme had to be redesigned, again, not uncommon. This was caused by various reasons, such as more information being discovered when on site about ground conditions, and also assumptions that had been made at the design stage of the project had to be changed when actual site conditions were known. Those amounted to 408,000. So if you add that to the previous 414,000 I talked about, both those elements amounted to £822,000. Netted off with a small saving, that additionality came to £802,000. I know this is extremely complicated, so in conclusion, therefore, if you look at paragraph 21, I've tried to make it as simple as possible. I've summarised the financial position. Original contract price was 1.769. The compensation events and the changes that we asked for all come under the term compensation events, was 1.473 million. So therefore the revised contract price, when you add those two together, was 3.242 million. Take the funding that I've mentioned earlier from existing capital programme resources and the developer funds, the developer contributions was £670,000. That meant the remaining element to be funded was £2.572 million. That's at 3242 that I mentioned, less the £670,000. So basically, what's to be funded in summary was 2.572. There's existing provision, which was only an estimate, as I mentioned previously, and it was only for the construction of the road itself, was £2.210 million. That means, in essence, if you want to call it this, that leaves a shortfall of £362,000. There's no impact on the overall total capital budget for all City Deal projects, and I just want to make that clear to you. So given all the circumstances, what I'm proposing is that we make an adjustment to the existing allocation of resources within the General Fund Capital Programme, and the way that that's split between the proposed New Barrhead Railway Station and Balgrayson Road to reflect the current situation and provide much more clear visibility about the cost. So what I'm proposing is that rather than get into the detail of that and other projects, this will be addressed in a further report in the near future. Because of all the coronavirus issues affecting all the councils in the Glasgow City Region project, the Glasgow City Region, the project management office that works for us but is based within Glasgow City Council, has asked all the City Region councils to update and or reprofile their projects in relation to costs and timelines. And staff within my department are currently working on that. And I can tell you, and Gillian will confirm this, that all of the councils are experiencing slippage because of all the coronavirus issues. I see that in the management reports that go up through the Chief Executives Group and goes to the City Region Cabinet as well. So Councillor Buchanan would be aware of seeing that as well. They're all impacted on this, and they're all away looking at reprofiling and recosting their projects. So it's a major job. However, I think given all the circumstances, I'd like to bring forward a full report to the Cabinet and possibly in the very near future, but possibly May, if I could do it in that time scale, in relation to the scope and the timescales and the costs for all City Deal projects, because I think it's time now for a proper Cabinet discussion around those issues. Given some of the circumstances that have occurred there, it's quite clear to me, and I have to be upfront, my staff haven't necessarily followed contract standing orders and financial regulations. However, they've done what they've done with the best of intentions. So I've put in training now for staff in relation to all NEC3 contracts, council contract standing orders and financial regulations. The first of those training sessions is actually next week, and I'll be attending it myself. It will be led by Jerry Mahan, our Chief Legal Officer, and also Debbie Hill from Procurement, our Lead Procurement Officer. And we'll bring in external assistance from the Glasgow City Project Management Office in relation to NEC3 contracts, which are new to many. The preferred format now for Glasgow City Region PMO, but for many councils they're very new and they're very challenging because they're different because of this issue around compensation events. Happy to take questions. Gillian's here and she can explain in further detail if anybody wants to know about some of the difficulties or the challenges faced on this project due to ground conditions, unforeseen conditions, redesigns and things like that. I know that's really complicated, but I've tried to explain it as simply as I can. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Cahill. I know there is a huge amount in the report. I think we've acknowledged that that there are some failures from the point of view of their understanding of NEC3 contracts and breaches in terms of our council contract standing orders. The initial tender was almost half of what the overall cost has been. That said, I know that many of those costs have been for compensation events, which again we all know are unforeseen and happen, and we would no doubt have paid cognisance to that had it been brought to us. The other aspects in terms of the betterment, yes, again, I think we would all welcome having seen or having an opportunity to look at those and having the and been in a position where they should have been approved either by Cabinet or by Council. And again, I don't doubt that we would have approved them and we would move forward, because they are clearly areas that we would want to take forward and ensure that we had future-proofed the road. The road itself, I've been on it, it does look fantastic, and I know that it will pay dividends in terms of moving forward, both with the station, with our visitor centre, and indeed with the housing, because that has all been factored into that. So I think we're all aware that we would have agreed to ensure that that work be carried out as part and parcel of the design of the road and the construction of the road. But we do need to bear cognizance, and I appreciate that new training is in place and has been taken forward to go over those issues in order to ensure that it hopefully shouldn't happen again. Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that the contract was 1.769 million, but in the capital plan you had it down as 2.21 million. I'm presuming that the difference between those was to account for any contingencies, which obviously often happen. So is that not already compensated for in that, within that difference? And item 25, when you're talking about the training, is this the training for the NEC3 contracts? Is that so that staff bring papers to Cabinet earlier about improvements and betterments, which look incredible? And as Councillor Buchanan says, I'm sure Cabinet would have been delighted to approve those anyway. Or is it in terms of ensuring that right from the start we have a better estimate of the anticipated cost?
It's to ensure staff, primarily it's to ensure staff totally understand all of the issues around contract standing orders, variations, when you have to advise the Cabinet, when you have to perhaps report to Council. I don't really want to go into the detail of what they currently say, but for example, our contract standing orders and financial regulations say in them that they don't apply to city deal contracts. And what the bizarre thing, this has caught a few other councils, what the actual city deal thing says is that it refers you back to your own financial regulations and contract standing orders. So there's confusion. It needs to be absolutely clarified. So that's to make that perfectly clear for staff. I think they need a bit of support, particularly in these areas, and that's what we'll be providing. Your previous comment was all that happened was there was a rough estimate made of £2.21 million in the capital programme, and it so happened that the tender came in for 1.769, which was below that. So what I've tried to do is explain through the report all the additions for all the various reasons, and then try to net off the final cost against that provision within the capital programme.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Cahill. When you go, Caroline, you wish to go.
Sorry, I appreciate that. Again, and I see all the breakdown, which is really helpful to help us understand, because we obviously, it is, as you say, very complex. I just wondered, would normally the difference between 1.769 and 2.21, would that not normally be? Would you not normally slightly overestimate to allow for some contingencies anyway?
There was, but I think that's to an extent a side issue. Yes, so we did absorb the extra capacity within that £2.21 million to do the additionality and to do the compensation events for other reasons and to do the redesigns, etc. I think, really to answer your question, had it been different circumstances and it been a simpler project, when it came in, when the estimate was £2.21 million and the project, the tender came in at £1.769 million, in normal circumstances, had it been a simpler project, that would have left us with good contingency levels within the estimated budget. However, I've tried to explain all the additions that actually occurred.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Cahill. Mrs. McCrossan, I'll bring you in to perhaps explain.
I would just say to back Andy up on that one, you'll know with our quarterly capital monitoring reports, when tenders come back, we don't immediately reduce our estimated spending if they come in low, for the very reason that Councillor Bamford makes, because you do then, as the project progresses, find unexpected things, and we don't tend to give up any goodness, if you like, on individual projects until that project is complete. On the sort of wider aspect of the NEC 3 training, it's not just going to be a focus on the environment staff. The corporate asset management group, which oversees how we plan all our capital projects and get the capital plan together, we're also going to have a look at the overall assumptions that should be built in across all of the council's projects going forward, for contingencies, to make sure that we're quite happy that we've got an adequate level been applied right across the council, not just for the city deal or roads projects. So it's just to give you that assurance that we're looking at it more widely. So it's not just the local team that's been trained on this. We're going to look more widely.
Sorry, can I come back in very quickly, Leader?
Yeah.
Thanks for that comment, Margaret. It's a good one. It's one I should have made to Councillor Bamford. In terms of the training, what's one of the elements that I've insisted on is that staff are aware of and know how to put in industry standard contingency and optimization bias into contracts at the start instead of having to come back later. So it is an important point, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Councillor Merrick, I'll bring you in a moment, Danny.
No bother, that's great.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks for the report, Andy. And yes, it is a fairly complex report, but there's a couple of things I wanted to say. I mean, I get the betterments. When the bonnet is open and you see obvious things that need fixed, well, why wouldn't you? And what would be interesting, and I'm sure you can't say this off the top of your head, or I'm not sure you can't, but you probably can't. How much would these betterments have cost if we had have shut the bonnet, gone away, and come back and tried to do them? Because the way I look at this project, it's an enabler for a lot of other good things to happen. Yeah. So I think that the way the actual work that's happened has been fantastic. All we're talking about here is procedure and protocol, really, and scrutiny, and that's what we're going to get more of when we get a chance to get our heads right around it as much as elected members can. When you bring the report that you said you're going to bring to another cabinet meeting, hopefully by May, and then we can have another look at it. But yeah, welcome the training that's coming up for all staff and all these things, and just move ahead with what we have. And I think what the leader said also, and we can't say this because it didn't happen, but it's almost certain that all these things would have been approved by Cabinet and indeed full council. Why would they not have been? I can't see anything controversial in the work that was actually performed.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Merrick. Yeah, I'll bring you in a moment. Mr. Callum, I would take Councillor Lafferty first of all, and then I'll bring you back in for Councillor Devlin.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, it's just a few comments. I certainly am very impressed with the standard of this report and the information it's bringing forward to the Cabinet and the Council. Well done to everybody concerned. It seems to be that Barrhead, despite being surrounded by basically agricultural land, seems to conceal a mass of contaminated metallic substances that create problems whenever we have any sort of developments out with the old centre of Barrhead. I was wondering, maybe I picked up wrong, it was talk about foul water being pumped. I was wondering why that was. I probably haven't made the report sufficiently well. The surrounding area where the housing development and others takes place is up high, is it not? Gravity, but not some assistance to disposing of wastewater. I appreciate these are issues that are more for the Scottish Water. Likewise, I thought it was a bit funny. We'll have to get some water supply up to the what you might call it, the up beyond south of the dams to Darnley to serve facilities. It just seems strange that in an area surrounded by water on every side, there's not a drop to drink. To make a cup of tea from a facility. Just a few comments. Right, Lisa.
Thanks, Councillor Lafferty. Mr. Cahill, Gillian.
Just very quickly, in relation to the comments regarding would the costs have been extra, got to remember we used competitively tendered rates and there was good competition for that contract. I'll never be able to guess or estimate what the additional costs would be, but my instinct tells me definitely that had we carried out these at a later date, you'd have to let a new contract, you'd have to do a new tender, that's all got cost involved with it. And it was likely, almost certainly, I would have thought, because you've got a new contractor having to mobilise, set up a site and all that, that those would have been additional. It's without doubt. And they were good rates that we got for the tender. Maybe on the foul water and the water supply, I know that rock was an issue. We came across rock. Maybe, Gillian, if you wanted to make a few quick comments. And I think Councillor Devlin had been waiting to get in as well.
Yep, he is.
Yep, sorry. Still of water, but there isn't actually a fresh water supply anywhere in that area because it's never actually been developed ever for anything other than a reservoir. We found rock in terms of the creation of the water pipe, the fill drainage. Fill drainage has to, well, the best scenario is that it follows the contours so that you don't actually have to intervene and pump it. In this particular case, we couldn't do that because of the topography, which is why we needed the pumping station for the fill sewerage to get it to go downhill or uphill and then downhill. In terms of the water, the fresh water supply, obviously we're going to have a train station in that area, so there's chances there's going to be, some need for utilities there. And we're also hoping to develop in the future some facilities in the Balgristone car park at the top of the road. So to future-proof it and to make sure that we don't have to dig up the road again to put in a water supply, that's why the water supply was taken up to the top, so we can future-proof that. I hope that helps.
Thanks for that, Gillian. Yeah, that's helpful. Danny.
Hi, Tony. Just a point in paragraph. Sorry, you okay?
Yeah, you're okay.
Right, sorry. Just a point in paragraph 18 in regards to the housing capital budgets, approximately 200,000 in total between housing and roads will put into these projects. Can I ask what's been dropped off the housing capital programme? Andy,
I don't have an answer to that as yet, unless Gillian knows differently.
All I would say, Andy, was that within the affordable, obviously there is a need to have a foul waste pumping station to serve the council house development on that site. So if it wasn't done as part of the Balgristone contract, it would have to have been paid under the council house contract. So one way or another, the money would have to have been spent.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gillian. Yeah, I think a valid point.
Can I come back in?
On you go, Danny, yeah.
I mean, regarding, the community sums or the developer contributions, I mean, part of that goes into the housing revenue account. Am I right in saying that? Now, we're going to use the developers' contributions as well for these projects, plus that 100,000 from the housing revenue capital programme.
Yeah, the affordable housing contributions that we take from private housing developments in, for example, Barhead South, that goes towards partly funding the new council house developments and other affordable houses. So that's already taken into account.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Great.
Okay, you're right with that, Danny. Yeah.
I'm fine.
Basically, yeah. If the work hadn't been done just now, we would have needed to have done it at some point when we were building the houses anyway. So it's a case of picking up the cost earlier.
Housing's a poor relations of the council.
Not at all, Danny. I know I've seen a couple other hands there. I'm not sure if they're still wanting to come in, Margaret or Phil.
I was just going to say, Leader, that provision has been made in the capital programme for the road in relation to the housing revenue account, so that's all accounted for. Okay, thanks, Mr. Dawes. Okay, thank you. Margaret, were you one back in? Are you okay?
No, it was just to say that the developers' contributions they're not generally available to the housing revenue account. They're only for very specific purposes, which Andy's detailed in paragraph 18.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Okay then, colleagues, if there are no other points, are we happy then that the recommendations are that the considerable additional betterment provided through the revised project, the contract compensation event changes in relation to redesigns and on-site conditions, and that a further report regarding the scope, timescales and costs for all City Deal projects will be submitted to the Cabinet in the near future. I'll be happy to approve those recommendations. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues, much appreciated. That concludes our business for this morning. So thank you to everyone for your attendance and forbearance. I know they've been quite long reports, so thank you for that. And I'll see most of you in a short while for our next meeting. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye. Bye, folks.
Thanks, Leader.